I went into this stand science thinking there was no way, no possible way this could be real. I thought this was just another instance of Araki pulling something out of his rear end, like he did with the oxygen tanks of Zawardo. There is no specific backing for rainbows turning people into snails, I would constantly repeat to myself. I just didn't believe that the Florida weatherman could do it. Yet, this delightfully devilish man known as Wes Weather Report Bloomerine and his ability Heavy Weather proved me wrong. Let's rewind the clock a bit for a moment and tell you how I got into this mess, this downpour of research. I'm out here collecting the Part 6 Super Action statues because I know as soon as Stone Ocean gets animated, the prices are gonna skyrocket. And my favorite one is easily Weather Report. Besides a few kinks with the stand itself, this figure stand, not the stand Weather Report, god, oh, this is already confusing. It's overall a fine addition to my collection. At the turn of the new year, I asked you guys on Twitter which stand signs you would like to see in 2021. And if you're not following me there, what are you doing? You should rain down some of your love by smashing that subscribe button, turning on all notifications, because I suffered for you guys to do this video. But as I was saying on Twitter, Heavy Weather was easily the most replied stand. So I decided to bite the escargot, or I don't think you're even supposed to bite those. I think you're supposed to swallow them whole, whatever, and look into what is considered probably the most blatantly anti-scientific ability in the entire series of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Weather Report has always been one of the most powerful stands with one of the most ambiguous abilities to control the weather. Like Gold Experience's ability to give life, this ability goes to various lengths of portraying the different weather phenomena. Weather Report's ability is described by Pucci as just manipulation of the atmosphere. And if there's one thing more difficult to figure out than the human brain, it's probably the climate of the Earth. This brings us to the description of Heavy Weather, Weather Report's ultimate ability that comes from repressed rage being unleashed after he regains his lost memories from Versace. Let me read to you what the stand information card says. Heavy Weather alters the refraction angle of incoming rays of the sun's light with its ability to control the weather and creates a natural subliminal effect. Doing so affects the mental state of all organisms and they start perceiving themselves as snails. Perhaps it is hearkening back to the ancestry of all organisms. Alright, so that gives us a little bit of a game plan to tackle this video with. First, I'll define reflection and refraction and go through a quick derivation of those concepts using simple geometry. This means we're going to discuss how Snell's law plays into this situation. We'll touch on the visible light spectrum and the use of rainbows, briefly talk about subliminal messaging and how that works, and finally, we'll wrap up with the two most important questions. Why snails, and why aren't the shell wearers affected by heavy weather? The answers are surprisingly interesting and will probably make this one of the coolest stand sciences ever done as we show the credibility to one of Araki's weirdest abilities.
I'm okay. Squidward said I'm fine. Ah! Ah! Gary, I'm fine. Ah! I take it back, Gary. Something is wrong with me. Ow.
SpongeBob, I already told you. You're gonna be just fine.
Meow.
Light. Light is made up of electromagnetic waves, and as they propagate in a direction, let's say Z, they have an electric component in one direction, X, and a magnetic component in another direction, Y, with a certain wave vector K, wavelength lambda, angular frequency omega, and time T. Light travels in a vacuum at a set speed of 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second, and with no phase shift, there is a simple relationship between the initial strength of an electric and magnetic fields and the speed of light. But this is the 3D model that was developed by Maxwell in the 1860s, right? The study of light has been going on for hundreds of years prior to that, back to the days of Newton when he was describing the whole world and all of its phenomena with forces and particles. So Newton thought, why couldn't you describe light as a particle too? Photons, which were considered little particles, but now are more accurately described as packets of energy. We know that later prevailing theories describe a wave-particle duality, but the origins of this date back to the Flying Dutchman of physics, Huygens, and his first mate, Fresnel, who thought that light moved in a similar fashion to sound waves. From a source, light goes out radially, and at any point on the crest of a wave, spherical shapes called wavelets oscillate outward at the same frequency of the source, making ripples, or pure pure Hamon energy. Now here comes this man Snellius. He is menacingly approaching both Newton and Huygens and decides to use geometry to show what happens as light travels from one medium to another, like from air to water or air to glass. The light will bend in some way, and this is physically observable, but back in the 1800s when they weren't thinking in the third dimension for most stuff, Snelly Boy thought, okay, let's just treat light as a ray from the sun. There's always an angle of incidence normal to the surface of the medium. Normal meaning an angle from a perpendicular line to the surface of the medium, and then an angle of transmission or refraction normal to the surface of the medium. There's an index of refraction, n, for each medium, and a speed of light going through the medium is the speed of light in a vacuum divided by the index of refraction in the medium you are in. So since the index of refraction for air is essentially 1, that means the speed of light is just c, 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second, which is what we brought up before. Snell's law is easy to understand using simple geometry. This is just a quick walkthrough of how you can reach this conclusion, and it's also to test myself to see if I remember how to correctly derive things. Essentially, you have an interface with air on one side, glass on the other. You have to recognize from these two rays of light, ray A will hit the interface before ray B will. And by marking a point C where you can draw a line that has a right angle between A and C, this gives you a right triangle. Now these values over here just mean the absolute values of length between point C and B, or A and B, or anything else. Using right triangles, the sine of the angle is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So hopefully this is ringing a little bit of a bell to everyone. And then you can get delta T, which is the difference in time between each light ray hitting the interface. Then you add another point F where you can draw another right angle and make another right triangle. And remembering that the speed of light in a medium is c over n, the index of refraction, you can plug in all of these components into this equation, cancel out the lengths between A and B and the speed of light c on both sides, and then you'll get Snell's law. But what does this formula mean? This proves Huygens' idea that the speed of light in a medium is actually slower than it is in air. So the index of refraction for air, like we said, is 1, for water is about 1.3, and for glass is 1.5. But light can always be reflected, and one of the coolest things about reflection is that the angle you hit a medium at is the same angle it will bounce off at. Using Snell's law, you can determine what's called a critical angle, or a point at which there is total reflection. This happens if you rearrange the formula such that Ni over Nt is equal to sine of theta t over sine of theta I. If the incident angle happens to be over about 50 degrees, you'll get a sine of theta t over 90 degrees, which is larger than 1, which physically can't happen. And what happens in the real world is that doesn't work out either. There is no refraction at that point, so all of the light will be bounced off, all of the energy is reflected. This is a kind of crazy huge concept because this single principle allows fiber optic cables to carry information insanely fast, insanely far without losing anything. Inside each of the thousands of cables are walls with an index of refraction anywhere between 1.5 to 3, and as long as the angle they enter in is above the critical angle, total reflection will continue until the image sent reaches its target. And this concept is what I believe is going on with heavy weather. I know there's a lot of math and background to explaining such a thing, but this is probably one of the most complex abilities in the entire series. Heavy weather is not necessarily adjusting the angle at which the rays are coming in, more so it's adjusting the index of refraction off of some specific medium in the air such that there will be total reflection from the sun's rays into your eyeballs. But instead of burning them and blinding you, there's arguably worse repercussions. Snails. We talked about Snell's law, but have you ever heard of Snail's law? Thank you, I'll be here all night. When you touch a rainbow from heavy weather, you begin to perceive yourself as a snail. Take and taste the rainbow to a whole new level. Geez, with those tentacle receptors, are we? Oh my god. No, this ability does not actually turn you into a snail. One of the weird things was, during the fight between Jolene and Versace, Jolene appears to use her snail body to get to an advantageous position. But this isn't really what's going on, because she was shown disassociating her body into small strings just in one of the previous fights. It's pretty interesting on the reread, characters using old abilities but perceiving them differently. Now, I can't comment too much on the science behind subliminal messaging because that's more of a psychological effect and not my area of expertise at all. But subliminal messages are these hidden messages here and there and everywhere. You'll see them in advertising. They'll make you want to buy things. Like, I don't know what a subliminal message is. Like, I'm gonna eat a sub sandwich. I'm gonna go to the substation and turn on the power. I'm gonna reboot the sub system on my computer. But anyway, ways, subliminal messaging works in a variety of ways. And the only information I could find out about rainbows and subliminal messaging were some theories about rainbows being used to turn children gay. Listen, JoJo didn't need rainbows to do that. We had a wide variety of big, strong, fashionably macho men and slender, androgynous, fashionably sensual men. But the science behind rainbows and what creates them brings us back to reflection and refraction. I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, light was an electromagnetic wave. Light has a spectrum anywhere from 10 picometers to 10,000 meters. And the visible light spectrum only occupies a teeny tiny portion of it, between 400 and 700 nanometers. These are all measurements of the wavelength of light. When light hits a raindrop, it is hitting a different medium and it scatters visible light spectrum all at different angles, and that's what we see in our eyes when we look up at double rainbows.
What does this mean?
The numbers, basically. What do they mean?
Notice that Weather's ability states that he has control over the entire atmosphere, and like I said, he's changing the index of refraction somehow off of a specific medium. What is that medium, you might be asking? The raindrops that form rainbows. Hence why the rainbows appear in places not physically possible for normal rainbows. So while the rainbows themselves aren't giving you the subliminal messages, or maybe they are, that's for you to decide, the moisture in the air is what's important and what gives heavy weather the power to change the refraction index so that we can perceive certain images. Now, it's snails for some symbolic reason of Poochie wanting to attain heaven and wanting people to see the ancestry, since snails have been on the earth for how long? How long is it? 500 million years? What? Oh, not the terrestrial ones we see in the manga, but mollusks in general? I mean, I guess I sort of knew that, but it seems like not a video goes by where I don't get to mention my adoration for paleontology. I mean, that actually surprised me. That's very, very cool. So heavy weather's ability is said to affect all organisms, but think for a moment, the only living things that aren't affected are Weather Report himself, because he's the user, obviously, Poochie, because he blinded himself, and these strange insects known as the shell wearers. The shell wearers are likely ground beetles, drawn specifically like the Japanese Carabus bleptoids, but are more likely the American Scaphintonus angusticolus. I probably butchered those names, but what do you expect? I'm not Tirzu. Now, this is probably where the science gets a little weird, because I said ground beetles and some of them are drawn with wings, but they're drawn like ground beetles. Okay, that science part probably not right, but I was wondering why these specific predators of the snails were unaffected, because we see other animals becoming snail hybrids. And is it just to give us some dramatic tension while this ability is going on? No, I don't think so. There's actually an absolutely insane reason for what's going on. Have you ever heard of Grebennikov levitation? Basically, some Russian biologists claim to create a levitation device, and I'm not here to debate the validity of such a concept, but the components of such a device were really fascinating. Beetle elytra. An elytron is a hard, shiny shell covering of a beetle, normally over the back or the wings. But what's interesting, and what is insanely, mind-bogglingly just so great, is that these shells are strong dielectric materials. So just so you know, a dielectric material is a strong electrical insulator and a poor conductor, and it has the ability to polarize applied electromagnetic radiation. These beetles are biologically immune to heavy weather. What? What? This is the biggest fourth dimensional mega mind underwater chest master tactician move Araki has ever made! And I was shocked when I discovered this, to say the least. By polarizing the incoming light, the beetle shells keep these animals safe from ever seeing the subliminal messages, like a natural force field. Honestly, this might bring part 6 up a notch when it comes to appreciating the science behind the fight. And this happens during arguably the best fight in the entire part. So even if I didn't like certain particular parts where the story hit and certain little beats here and there, I can't deny that this is the coolest incorporation of science, psychology, religious symbolism, and badass action in all of JoJo's. And we're done. That's it. I can't believe I wrote an over 2,000 word script for how a Florida man makes everyone think they're snails. But that's the nature of JoJo. That's the nature of this channel. That's the nature of Sand Science. And if I didn't earn your subscribe over this video, I don't know what will, because it was a grind. I have been wanting to tackle this guy for a long time. I had a lot of ideas. I had it all set up, and it sort of just spiraled into things that were much more than I expected. So let me know in the comments below which stand you would like me to cover next. Leave a like and turn on all notifications for more science, education, memes, analysis, and much, much more signature Shuckmeister style content. Have a beautiful doing. Keep listening to those subliminal messages, and I'll see you all next time.